here we go. Welcome to our topic today, domestic violence, what's making it more deadly, and what programs really work. My name is Maria Meyer. I know sometimes I don't pronounce my name and it's very difficult to do, so I'm doing that for you today. Maria Meyer here, welcoming you in the name of our tremendous, break a sweat, brilliant board. And you're going to see their faces here, but they are really working behind the scenes. Many of them are here in the audience today. Good morning, fearless leaders, and a very, very special welcome to Deanne Conley-Graham, who passed this last month, but she is always with us. And on to the next slide, because Deanne charged our board chair and me with keeping on the work. That's what she wants us to do, keep on the work. And we are, and you are. So of the many opportunities and the different programs that we have, one of the things that we do is we have a volunteer corps. And that volunteer corps, like this is the Impact Collaborative, they're called Impact Agents. And the Impact Agents are inviting you all to have a very, very special session. Next time we meet is Monday, October 24th at 5 p.m. And our dear colleagues from the League of Women Voters, some of you I think are here today, we'll be doing a very special Decode the Ballot training session. Deanne wants us to vote. That's one of the things that we can do. And our Legislative and Advocacy Committee wants you to vote. We are nonpartisan. This is a nonpartisan event like all of ours, but we do want to understand what the amendments are and what you're seeing in your ballot. So please do join us one and all, whether you're an impact agent or not, to Decode the Ballot training session on October 24th. Thank you all, as I've said, for supporting us, and that includes our funders, whether you gave $10 when you signed up for this Impact Collaborative today, or whether you're a Grand Mission supporter and able to give us $83.33 a month as a sustaining donor or a grand donation. No matter what, you are fueling advocacy and a focus on women and girls in your community every single day. So we thank you. So moving on, Kami, some of you are there and others are signing up. We thank you, our Grand Mission Honor Roll supporters. Thank you. We also have a lot of fun. Raise the Bar is a signature Women's Fund event, and it's always been the legal community and many judges. Judge Kelly, we hope you will be with us, and we thank you for making sure all the judges are able to join us who are able. If you know a lawyer, you can also come to Raise the Bar. Serious fun for a serious cause, and it really has traditionally supported all of our work on our freedom from violence pillar. So please go to our website, sign up, and you can join us on October 20th, indoor and outdoor, COVID protocols or not. You can be wherever you want in the gorgeous History Miami Plaza or inside the museum. So I see you're introducing yourselves. That's so important. Please, this is your Impact Collaborative attendees. Please be very active and address everyone. We're showing these gears because we want to show you how important you are. We have our 4 programs there. Impact Collaborative, this is one program. Public awareness campaigns, you know those. Domestic violence in times of COVID, for example. Grant making, our core program, which we're thrilled to be returning to. We have returned to, and data and research. And in a minute, I'll go to the dashboard. But I want you to know that our impact agents and our advocacy all also interjoin with all of you. So when you come here and learn about what you should know and what you can do about women and girls in our community, you are part of that big machine. We're starting here with our gender equity dashboard, that research program that we have. Our senior research associate, Viviana Alvarado Pacheco, is here in the audience and she is posting. She is at your service. We know that each of you have some kind of a personal anecdote because domestic violence, intimate partner violence will have crossed your path in the past. But we also need the facts, and that is what your gender equity dashboard is here to do. Here, what you are seeing is our updated version, Freedom from Violence section. It now includes 3 separate sections, one on human trafficking, one on child abuse, and one on domestic violence. And we're going to go to that slide, what Viviana and the team, Dr. Ilcheva, put together for us. This is a new drill down and a map by municipality on reported domestic violence cases here in Miami-Dade. So you'll always have that the gender gender equity dashboard on our website. We encourage you to use it, and often you'll find out what you need to know. And we're going to go on for what we need to know to our keynote speaker, a fabulous, terrific leader in our community, giving extra service always, Judge Carol Kelly. Please take it away.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for that kind introduction. I just want to start off saying that I'm really honored to be here with this amazing panel. Look forward to sharing some of my insights and learning from the other experts in the field. Because as we know, collaboration is the key to any project that we undertake, and domestic violence is a significant issue that we have in Miami-Dade County as well as the state of Florida. So next, please. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Domestic violence, what's making it more deadly, and what services really work. And I was asked to start off with compiling some statistics to kind of put this into some perspective. So I started off with the state of Florida fatality review statistics. And just to do some comparisons between 2019 and 20 and 2020 and 21. And as you can see statewide, the numbers are pretty similar in terms of the number of domestic violence homicides, way too many, in the hundreds of homicides, and how many offenses are being reported to the police, which is really significant. So these are just the ones that are reported to the police. And as we all know, domestic violence is a very underreported crime. So we have over 105,000 cases being reported to the police each year, and over 200 fatalities. Next, please. These are the hotspots in Florida for domestic violence, and these stats come from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and it's based on the number of domestic violence homicides in proportion to the population. And I think the interesting thing to see is that in many of these counties, they are rural counties. And in rural counties, many individuals do not have the same access to services that individuals do in metropolitan cities. The one standout here is Duval County, which is where Jacksonville, a large city, is located. So I know through the work with the Florida Supreme Court, we're going to talk about, what we can do to help and reach out to these counties. The good thing for Miami-Dade County, and these statewide hotspots are basically the same year after year. It's the small rural counties, with the exception of Duval, which is Jacksonville, which is always on the hotspot list. But what can we do? And that today we're going to talk about Miami-Dade County particularly, but it also kind of goes to show us that individuals that are in rural areas, and we do have rural areas in Miami-Dade County, oftentimes don't have that access, whether it's transportation, knowledge, or other things. So next slide, please. So from the gender of decedents, and I took this from the 2021 statewide report, 97% were female, 1% gender non-conforming. So this is a gendered crime. Domestic violence is a gendered crime, and we know that both men and women are victims of domestic violence, but the statistics play out that it is a gendered crime. Some other interesting statistics on the next slide are the ethnicity of the perpetrators and decedents. And I put these stats for 2020 and 21. And I think it's kind of interesting, and we know that our state is becoming more Hispanic, but if you see the numbers, the non-Hispanic, non-Latino perpetrators and decedents in 2020, 71% were non-Latino. In 2021, that number dropped down to 59%. And then you'll see correspondingly that the Hispanic Latinos went from 29% up to 38%. So that's a huge increase in the Hispanic Latino perpetrators and decedents. And for 2020, we had no Haitian Americans, but in 2021, we had 2%. There were 2 domestic violence homicides in the state of Florida that involved Haitian Americans. But next slide, please. So here's our statistic, and I think that's part of the reason why we're here today, because in 2021, we had 40 domestic violence homicides in Miami-Dade County. 40 individuals lost their lives to domestic violence, and that was up from 33 in 2022. So we don't want this to go up. We want it to go down, obviously. And so I think today, and we thank you so much for putting this together, because I think collectively, we can talk about some of the issues that domestic violence victims face, what works, what doesn't work, and where we can go to have this number in 2022 hopefully be down. So if we go to the next slide, the lethality factors, and these really, I read the statewide reports, which I'm sure many of you do every year, and pore over the statistics. And these lethality factors repeat themselves all the time. So prior domestic violence history, if there's a history that we know about domestic violence, we know the likelihood that it can result in homicide, and particularly if there's any weapons that are involved in that assault. This is really key. The decedent was attempting to end the relationship. In over 63% of the cases, the decedent was attempting to leave. That means maybe the police were called, maybe a civil injunction was filed, or maybe they were seeking out and telling friends and family they were going to leave. Perpetrator had access to firearms, and we're going to talk about each of these. Firearms increases the rate of somebody's chance of becoming a victim of a domestic homicide by 400%. So the correlation between firearms and domestic violence fatalities is huge, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then substance abuse, extreme jealousy, and mental health issues all had a part in many of the homicides. And this repeats itself. This was just the stats from 2019, but this carries through basically every year. Next slide, please. So to date in the civil court, so this is individuals coming in to file for civil injunctions, we've had 4,559 to date. So as you see, in 2021, we only had 4,425, and we're only in October. So people are increasing, coming to the court to seek this relief from the court, which makes us very happy, because as I think everybody understands, during COVID, the numbers went way down and people were not seeking that access, and they're coming back again, and we're very, very happy about that. Next slide, please. So criminal DV arrests. I think this is also really interesting. You'll see that from 2020, 2021, 2022, the arrest rate is very consistent. So it seems as though the arrests are the same. And that's interesting, because in 2020, so we were still in the height of COVID, and the arrests were still coming in. So people were contacting the police. The next, this is pretty interesting. Criminal DV case convictions. So you'll see the first number is the felony conviction, and the second number is the misdemeanor conviction. And they're very low. Our criminal convictions are very low. And that is nothing to do with the ability of our police or our prosecutors per se. It has to do with oftentimes the criminal arena is not the place where victims want to see they don't want to go through with the criminal prosecution. They don't want a loved one to be in jail. And if we can go to the next slide. So in both cases, in civil and criminal, this is just from the court perspective, both cases are always dependent on victim cooperation. So if a victim does not want to cooperate, in the criminal case, it always starts after an arrest. And in a civil case, it arises when the victim comes in to file for an injunction. But if they don't cooperate, the case goes nowhere. We have many of our civil cases that are filed, the petitioner may not show up for final hearing and the case needs to be dismissed. We know in the criminal cases, the vast majority of victims will not cooperate with the prosecution. And as you know, these are crimes that occur mostly in private, and the evidence is based basically on victims' testimony and victims' evidence. There's not additional evidence other than that. So if they don't cooperate, the case cannot go forward with a conviction or any type of help or counseling. And in talking to victims, they don't want to see their loved ones incarcerated. What they want is the violence to stop and the abuser to get help. And most of them want the relationship to continue in a nonviolent way. So that's what they're seeking. And so what can we do to help them? I really believe that in the civil arena, people coming in to file for injunctions, we have a lot more flexibility in what we can do to help the families. Number one, we can have the stay away order. We can modify the stay away order. We deal with things that are really fundamental, and we're going to talk about those, such as economics, child support, alimony, where the victim's going to live, time sharing with the children, counseling, and all of these do not result in any incarceration. So it's just something for everybody to think about that works with domestic violence victims, to remember that in most cases, victims don't want the respondent incarcerated. So let's talk about some barriers to victim safety. So, and we can go 2 slides. One is the definition of domestic violence. So in Florida statutes, it is only defined as physical abuse and stalking. And when petitioners come in for temporary injunctions, the court needs to find imminent danger. So a victim could be a victim of physical abuse, and they could say 3 years ago, you know, I was battered. There's been this entire relationship based on control, and I'm feeling that it's starting up again and I'm going to get battered again. And the court will not be able to find imminent danger, because imminent means present, right? So we need a broader definition in our statutes to include coercive control, which means emotional, psychological, spiritual, and economic abuse and control. That way, the court can really understand the nature of the relationship. And as we know, in so many of the domestic violence cases, physical abuse is just one part of the abuse that's going on, and all these other ways victims are being abused. And these are as powerful, if not more powerful in many cases, than the physical abuse. Shelter, the next, and I believe, you know, others can speak about this, but shelters are always at capacity. You know, where do you go if you need help? Yes, we always make room for people, but we don't have enough shelter space, and we keep working and we're building new ones, but that's a problem. The locations are in places where many people are not, you know, they're not in the metropolitan center. So if you have to go to a shelter, you are moving far away from your neighborhood, your family, your friends, your support system. And, you know, that's a barrier that victims think about when deciding whether or not they wish to go to a shelter with and without their children. Next slide, please. I think the biggest thing is right here, economics. So the cost of living in Miami is 11.6 higher than the national average. This is a very expensive county. And I also got some stats, if you could go to the next slide, about the costs of living compared to the national average. So the only place that we're lower than the national average is on our energy bills. And that's hard to believe because my energy bill is really large every month. But you look at food is 5% more expensive, healthcare 13%, housing 23.4%. I mean, that I think is what hits the nail on the head. Transportation, 10.7. And as we all know, transportation is not readily available for people in Miami-Dade County. It is very difficult and time consuming to get around our city, and it's very expensive to get to courthouses and park and use the services, even, the services that we have. So what works? The next slide. We need housing. We need more housing. That is a key, because victims who want to leave generally cannot afford to leave. In households where there are two incomes that are covering the rent or the mortgage, covering the costs associated with household expenses, leaving is just not an option, because if one person is out of the house who's contributing 50% or even a portion of the housing expenses, it becomes economically impossible for victims to keep their homes. Counseling works. We know that batterers intervention programs, parenting, substance abuse, and mental health, that works. That helps people come to understanding of their behavior, getting their behavior under control, giving them the resources in order to heal. So we know that that works. Education, and we don't do enough of it, and thanks so much for this program, because we need, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, we need to have more education. You can't have enough education on this topic. Firearms surrender. As we know, firearms are involved in approximately 68% of all domestic violence homicides. When a victim attempts to leave, it's the most dangerous time, and getting those firearms out of the hands of abusers is critical. And then, of course, community awareness and support. And again, I want to say in our county, I really think we're really lucky here, because we've had a long history of collaboration between multiple partners. We get together, we talk, we share resources. So next slide, please. I know we're starting with housing initiatives. I know our mayor is very, very involved in this, but maybe what we need is a set aside for domestic violence victims for the new housing initiatives. Have that written in so that these victims that continue to stay at home and continue to take the abuse and don't feel really that they can leave. Maybe our new housing projects, we specifically have housing dedicated to these people so that they can get in. And we're not talking about short-term shelter. We're talking about starting a new life in an affordable housing where they can go or they and their children can go. Next, please. So we can't order victims of domestic violence into counseling. That's statutory. And there's good reason, because victims leaving domestic violence are already hurdled with all types of different requirements and new things that they have to do. But they need counseling because they're all traumatized, and trauma doesn't just disappear. Trauma is something that stays with victims. They suffer from PTSD. They lose their self-respect. They lose their sense of self-sufficiency. Believe me, we've seen so many self-sufficient women beaten down through this coercive, controlling relationship that they lose that. They lose their self-respect. They lose their relationship skills because the relationship they've been in has been so unequal and so abusive that normal relationship skills, are lost. And then many of the victims suffer from mental health issues, either whether based on the trauma that they have experienced, or it has been a pre-existing a condition that they had. And many victims get involved in substance abuse, and it's an escape tactic, and we need to help them. And I know we have great, through Yvonne's CVAC and other community organizations, we do offer counseling. My wish would be is that we could get more victims in and really help them, because they're half of this equation. They need the strength to leave, and they need the resources to leave. So next one, education. We need to start out earlier. We're lucky that we're having a meeting coming up with the school board about doing a program with the courts and the middle and high school students to teach them about domestic violence. It's never too early to learn about this. Many of these students are exposed to domestic violence in their homes. We know that domestic violence is a learned behavior. We need to stop the cycle by talking to them, hearing from them, and teaching them about all the things that go into healthy relationships. Next. We don't do this at all, and I hope that this is something that we can develop here. So we have many, many, many couples that end up back together after violent relationships. And we know that counseling for couples doesn't work when there's battering going on, because there's no equality. There's no way that an individual who is being beaten down can go into couples counseling with a batterer. So I say post-batterers intervention. So the first line that we always address is getting the abuser to get counseling, because the violence has to stop and those issues have to be addressed, and the abuser needs to be accountable and take responsibility for his or her actions. But after that, these couples then end up back together, and we really need to come up with some really good programming for couples once they're back together after violence has been part of this relationship, in order to really start healthy communication, because in many of these relationships, there has never been healthy communication, and the use of professionals to be able to help both the victim and the abuser to be able to learn ways to communicate. Otherwise, they go back together in the same communication, the same relationship skills. The same relationship habits come back, and we're back in the same situation again. And the education about the effects of domestic violence on babies and children is really important. We found here that many, many batterers who learn about the fact that when they abuse their intimate partner and the parent of their child, that they are also directly abusing their child, that there are long-term significant consequences, mental, physical, psychological, developmental, that it really hits home to them, because most people really take stock in the fact that they want their children to be healthy. And so really zooming in on those cases where people do have children, to get them the education about what it's doing to their kids, we found that that has been very impactful and really caused individuals who may not want to change for other reasons to want to change for the benefit of their children. And then next, firearms. We know that firearms are responsible, as we said before, for homicides in 68% of the cases. And a woman's risk of homicide increases if her abuser has access to firearms by 400%. There are some suggestions to an amendment to our Florida statute right now on firearms. Our firearms statute is Florida Statute 790, to take away the firearms from abuser. This is going to be really important legislation. There are 42 states throughout the country that have firearms surrenders at the time of temporary and final injunctions. And based on recent case law, this is a really critical piece of legislation that we hope get passed. It is going up through the Florida Supreme Court Family Court Committee. I chair the Domestic Violence Committee, and we're hopeful that the Florida Supreme Court will be one of the groups that sponsors this. This is the last thing, which are risk protection orders. And for those of you that aren't familiar, a risk protection order is an order that only the police can file for, and it is only to remove firearms. If you look at the criteria in order to get a risk protection order, Many of the categories include domestic violence, include threats against others, include threats with firearms. So we need, I think, in Miami-Dade County to coordinate better with our police, to have the police start to work with domestic violence victims, to hear about firearms and the firearms in the homes and file for these risk protection orders on behalf of domestic violence victims, because as we see above, that firearm is going to be critical to remove it in order to increase victim safety. And then my last thing I want to say before we turn it over to everybody is this is the key. We have to empower women, and this group is one of the groups that, that's your focus. But girls and boys both need to understand that girls have control over their lives and over their bodies and over their destiny and over everything that they want in the future. And we need equal opportunities in every area. We see more and more females, and I believe females taking leadership roles is critical for young girls to see. There are possibilities, there are leaders, but in every area that there's leadership, girls and women need to be a part of it. And so that's what I have to say as the overview and some of the things that I've seen. And I want to just thank you all for listening to me.
You have empowered us with all of that amazing information, Judge Kelly. And there are a lot of powerful people with us here today, a lot of people who can act, and I know will. As you participate, please, in the chat, in the poll, in signing up for, replaying our Impact Collaboratives, please listen very carefully to one of our leading voices here today. Judge Kelly talked about how difficult it can be to leave, and we've got an incredible survivor champion leader voice here with us today. We'll ask most of our panelists to introduce themselves in 2 minutes or less, but I'm going to let our first panelist take another extra minute if you'd like, Alexis. It's shorter, but shorter if you want. It's up to you. Alexis, thank you very much for lending your voice to us here today.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Well, my name is Alexis Apps. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, and unfortunately, I found myself in a very dangerous situation, an abusive relationship. And just like the statistics say, which I almost became one, that it's problematic to get out. I just wanted to shed some light with the CVAC, because how immense they have been to my progress and my healing with all this. But again, awareness is the number one thing that we need to start off with. And I'm glad to be here to help.
We thank you so very, very much, Alexis, and we'll be back to you shortly. But next, we're going to go on with, you mentioned CVAC, and Yvonne Mesa can tell you exactly what, for those of you who don't know, what CVAC means. Our board member, Yvonne Mesa.
Good afternoon. It's so great to be here and to see so many familiar and unfamiliar faces. Yes, my name is Yvonne, and I have the privilege of working for Miami-Dade County for the Community Action and Human Services Department as an assistant director. And I have had the opportunity to oversee and basically create many programs within the violence prevention and intervention community, which really, again, happens to be a privilege that I'm very passionate about. And CVAC is a one-stop center, one of a kind in Miami-Dade County, where we have 38 partners co-located and providing services to the clients that come into the survivors. So definitely a place of resources and healing and opportunities. So I'll get back to explain a little more when the time is called upon.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you so much, Yvonne. And now we are going to welcome another incredibly busy person, Miami-Dade Police Department's Deputy Director, Stephanie Daniels. Please take it away, officer.
Good morning, everyone. Stephanie Daniels, Deputy Director of the Miami-Dade Police Department. And I must say, I'm excited to be here on this panel with these distinguished women, and also the doctor on the call. I've been in law enforcement for over 30 years, and I'm on the panel to do a short presentation, but also more so to provide and let individuals know that MDPD is here to assist and help with any resources that need to be shared or provided. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much. Michael, please, global expert, please introduce yourself.
I'm Michael Acton. I work with victims across the world and sometimes perpetrators. I wrote a best-selling book called Learning How to Leave after 30 years of psychological practice working across the court systems, family lawyers, social services, child protection units, drug dependency units, etc. And I have a lot to say.
And we can't wait to hear it. So this next section is that. What do we need to know? Not formally. What do the people here really need to know? What are you seeing out on the ground? And we're going to start with you, Alexis. What do people here need to know? What is the situation?
Well, for me, I guess people need to know, awareness. Awareness is number one, because even in my situation, while I was in it, I wasn't completely aware what was going on. Mentally, it takes a toll. Physically, I was everything from mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, sexually abused. And in the moment when you don't have the support system, it really does make you feel isolated. And when you're in one of those situations, that person tends to gain control of you, slowly stripping away your own self, and you get lost in it. And my number one thing is fear. Fear of being believed, fear of leaving, fear of the abuser, and fear of being alone, through this. So that's why I am extremely thankful for the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, because not going to lie, at first I was reluctant to go. I was suffering for concussion for over 2.5 months due to my last nearly fatal abuse incidents. And after a couple months of, trying to heal, I finally went in, and the amount of support and also not feeling alone, that other people are going through the same things, even though, it's not as known, I guess, because I unfortunately was not in only one abusive relationship, but one before. And I have literally flagged down a cop and tried to beg them to assist me, and they ended up taking the male side. So also being believed. So fear of being believed also kept me from coming forward or, staying in this very toxic, volatile relationship. So having the resources, like you stated earlier, with the CVAC has really assisted me in numerous of ways. They helped me with legal counsel. They helped me with moving, because I moved in order to protect myself. They assisted me with immense amount of support, and as well with many other things along the way. Like, I honestly don't think I could have done it without them. And, healing isn't linear. So I'm continuing every day to continue forward with my life. And sometimes I might not feel like a success, but I know overall I've come a long way, and resilience. But the number one thing I think is fear and being believed. That was my number one thing of trying not to. So I guess awareness is the number one way to start, to let the community know that not only if they are going through something similar, they're not alone. Support goes a long way.
Your voice is so important, Alexis. You've inspired us all today, and since the first day I met you, and that you wanted to be here and wanted to share, that is an incredible strength, and we honor you for caring so much about others. I think that's probably one of the biggest questions that every human here has today, because everybody knows somebody. What can I do? How do I handle it? So we really thank you for your voice. It's so
Yeah, especially if you see something, say something, because now I am more sensitive to other people when they speak to me, because not everyone is willing to speak up about their things. So sometimes little cues and asking if they're okay in situations that they don't want to speak up about, because I know I kept it from my whole friends and family. I wasn't going advertising my personal, abuse. So admitting to myself was also a number one factor.
That's terrific. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you so much. Yvonne, what are you seeing? You see a lot.
So I first wanted to tell Alexis that she has succeeded without a doubt. If you doubt for a minute that you have succeeded, let me assure you, you have, because you're now alive. You are now free from the abuser. And not only are you free, but you are being part of the support group that we're having at SIVA that is geared towards helping others get the strength that they need to not only become free, but to maintain themselves in a situation of being free from the abuser. So definitely kudos to you. And our respect to you for being able to walk away from an abusive relationship. So I think that there's so many things that we need to do as a community, as an individual, Maria. But I like to just give a very general statement. And that general statement is that we need to raise girls to be self-sufficient and to be independent. And we need to raise boys to be sensitive and to have a clear understanding of what healthy masculinity looks like. Those two things need to go in coordination. So we cannot be telling our girls that you need to be strong, you need to be self-sufficient, you need to be independent, while we're not telling our boys this is what healthy masculinity looks like. Because if we do that, then what's going to happen is that our girls are going to grow up to be independent, but they're going to meet one boy that does not understand that independence and self-respect does not threaten masculinity. So that's when domestic violence occurs. It occurs when you have an individual in the relationship that wants to control the relationship, that does not allow for that other partner to grow independently, to be herself or himself. And basically that is when domestic violence occurred. So without a doubt, domestic violence affects everyone, not only at a personal level, but also at a societal level. And it is just families, communities are very impacted by the effects of domestic violence. So domestic violence occurs to 20 individuals every minute, 20 individuals every minute. 1 of 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience or will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. So these are very horrific, numbers for us to live with and to be okay with, most importantly. So when we're dealing with victimization, Myra, there are a lot of things that we could do, and I know that our time is limited, so I'm not going to attempt to cover all. I like to the component of not being judgmental. I feel that listen without judgment is very important, because even when I go out in the community to speak about this subject, I still hear today people making the comment of, what did she do? Or maybe she would not have been so provocative in the way she dressed, or maybe if she had not been so whatever. There's always a list of things that a woman should not have done to prevent an episode of domestic violence. And that is the first thing that I want to dispel clearly and surely. And it is that there is nothing that a woman or a man, for that matter as well, that a human being can do not to deserve domestic violence. No one deserves to be a victim of domestic violence. not from a societal standpoint, not from a religious standpoint. I have yet come across any notion of any literature or any concept that explains that domestic violence is something that is okay and that we should be okay with it. So basically, again, the judgment, and going back to what Alexis had mentioned, I think that having spoken to by now millions of victims, I can tell you that victims are very afraid of how is this information going to be received? Not only received and acted upon, not only received, but acted upon, not only by the police, not only by social workers, advocates, but by family members, by friends. They fear that if they take action and they finally come out and talk about what's happening to them, that is going to, in fact, be turned against them, that is going to become a reason for people to judge them. And it is. And they are okay to, I mean, they're right to be concerned, because that's exactly what happens. Let's be very real and keep the conversation real. There is a lot of ignorance out there. And that's why education is the #1 thing that we can do to eliminate domestic violence. Because if you come out, and speak about it to a friend, to a colleague, to an advocate, to your social worker, to you, whoever, to your neighbor, and that person comes back with judgment, it is most likely, what's going to happen most likely is that person, that survivor, is not going to have the courage to go to the next person. Now, keep in mind that statistically in the United States, it has been said that it takes 7 episodes of domestic violence for a victim to finally end the abuse. So you really, when you're speaking to a survivor, you really don't know who you are. You don't know if you're this, if you happen to talk about the 4th, the 2nd, the 7th incident. You don't know what she's going through or what he's going through. So having that just non-judgmental behavior, being able to validate, if you heard Alexis, she was afraid of being believed. And I understand why she was, because I think often, people don't believe when a victim speaks. I spend great portions of my day standing in a position of defending victims and what they're saying, because often they're questioned. And why is she asking for this? And why does she need this? Well, they're human beings, and they need everything that you and me need to be able to make.
We are so lucky to have you defending.
So basically, we have a responsibility to help those who need this type of help, and survivors are one of those.
We're so grateful. That is very empowering, what you just said, and that is a terrific way to go over you, Deputy Director Daniels. We'd love to hear from the law enforcement perspective what you're seeing.
Yes, thank you. Pretty much just like some of the topics or some of the points that the judge talked about earlier. Of course, during COVID, we saw that a lot of it was underreported. A lot of crimes would have been reported, but of course, now that we are open and back out, we're seeing more and more domestic violence being reported, more so than in the last couple of last year or so. You can go to the next slide, please. As we know, domestic violence is violence or other abuse by one person against another person in the domestic settings. Domestic violence can come in any form, to include physical, verbal, emotional, economic, religious, sexual abuse. And we also have to understand too that domestic violence is just not where males are the perpetrator and females are the victims. We do have a small percentage where females are the perpetrator and males are the victims. From the law enforcement perspective, as it relates to domestic violence, is parties involved. These are individuals who are related by marriage, blood, and or live as if a family, and that also includes intimate partners. The next slide, please. Thank you. And in Miami-Dade County, we have a population over 2.8 million actually, and we only have 3 emergency shelters to house victims of domestic violence. And that's due to the lack of housing. Some victims have no place to go or no place to return after being a victim of domestic violence. Next slide. The different types of domestic violence, the types of domestic violence, includes, like I said earlier, physical abuse, which is the most commonly recognizable form of domestic violence, where it's difficult sometimes to hide the person's intent. Domestic violence also includes sexual abuse. This form is the most difficult form of violence to recognize. And a lot of times there's sexual abuse that occur in marriages. So we have to recognize and educate our victims and individuals within the community that it does occur within marriages as well. Another form is emotional abuse as well as financial abuse. And some of the causes of domestic violence include cycles or pattern of domestic violence regarding maybe family history. There's a history of it. The perpetrator could have grown up in a home where they observed domestic violence or even was a victim of domestic violence in their earlier years. The judge talked about mental illness. That is definitely some contributing factors of domestic violence, wanting to control their partner, as well as social distancing from family members. Next slide. We talked about that. The most common form is the physical violence is by far the most common because we see that most in societies, and physical and assault, battery is often the easiest to detect because we can actually see those on the victim. Next slide. When we you can go to the next one as well. When we talk about the key issues and challenges that actually affect domestic violence, it was talked about earlier, the lack of housing for domestic violence victims, the lack of prosecution, the lack of trust, as well as education. When we talk about the lack of housing, I agree with the judge earlier when she talked about funding. We need funding to provide better housing options for our victims of domestic violence. And of course, we need more immediate shelter so that we can kind of protect them and they don't have to rush to go back to the perpetrator. When we talk about the lack of prosecution, law enforcement would love to have the interview that is conducted by the original responding officers, as well as our detectives, to do the follow-up and actually allow the evidence that is collected to include our body-worn camera footage when we're interviewing victims and witnesses of it, surveillances, the written statements. We would like that to be significant, to be presented in court, where whether the victim decides to prosecute or be a witness in the case. Because as we talked earlier, the judge mentioned a lot of these victims do not want to see the perpetrator in jail. They just want the violence to stop, and they want the individual to get assistance. The victim refused to cooperate a lot of times because of fear of retaliation and or sometimes being deported, because we do see that a lot of our illegal residents have or are victim of domestic violence. So they, of course, they don't want to come and talk to the police about it because they don't want to be deported, as well as losing financial support from his or her partner. And religious cultures come into play a lot, as well as when we talk about the lack of trust. Some victims do not trust law enforcement for whatever reason, or believe that they will not be believed. And of course, they don't trust the justice system as a whole. When it comes to education, we believe that we need to start hosting more community leaders events so we can talk more about domestic violence, host and participate in a lot of the different types of community events where we can kind of bring these to light, have more discussions on it. And we do understand that Miami-Dade County has a huge immigration population who may not be familiar with domestic violent crime laws in our country. So we need to do a better job in making sure that those individuals understand what domestic violence is. We can go to the last slide. I just want to just share with everyone, the different types of resources out there, to include the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Of course, the Miami-Dade Police Department, where you can call 911 or even our non-emergency number. And it don't necessarily have to be within Miami-Dade County. It can be within any municipality. We also have individuals can reach out to our domestic crime section of our Miami-Dade Police Department. There's a Florida Domestic Violence 24-hour crisis hotline, as well as over where Yvonne Mesa is, part of the Miami-Dade Community Action and Human Services Department. So we have resources out there that we can provide to victims and or family members who may believe that their family members are involved in domestic violence.
Thank you, Deputy Director. And we will be sharing that slide in this next segment that comes after Michael of what you can do and tools. And we are going to get back in that section as well. I'm going to ask you to address what you brought up there about bringing in evidence that could count, even if the victim isn't talking really interesting things there. So thank you, Michael. We are so grateful to have your expertise here. Please take it away. What are you seeing in your practice?
Well, I guess first slide. Alexa's really grateful you're here today. You are my first slide. To get to the point of being transparent and honest about our lives is a huge step. And it's one that if anyone's watching this now, whether they're in voluntary service or in their personal life, and they feel they're trapped or addicted in some way in a toxic relationship, be very careful. Don't just think, oh gosh, I can do it now. Think about it, get help, and talk to somebody. Knee-jerk reactions are very dangerous. Judge Kelly, your stats really helped. That they do show us what tremendous death there is around from homicide and domestic violence that's reported or observed. Unfortunately, in my world of 30 years working across the inside people's minds and across the legal fields and child protection fields and adult protection fields, I think homicide and domestic violence battery, it only accounts for 30% of deaths. Most of the deaths over my 30 years of practice has been where someone has been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed and addicted to their abuser, that they actually take their own life. Suicide is massive. Unfortunately, it's not reported as suicide through domestic violence. It's just, oh, well, they were on their way there anyway, or they took drugs, or we knew about them. So it's not really reported. It's very underreported. And I think that we as service providers and the general public and victims of domestic violence really need to start being honest and transparent about that. We would save an awful lot more lives. But transparency and honesty is the first step to finding the right course for us. But again, it's got to be conducted very, very carefully. Could we go to the next slide? What's my part in this? I educate people all over the world about domestic violence and learning how to leave. And I equate learning how to leave an abuser as difficult as recovering from heroin, recovering from smoking, recovering from alcoholism. We always live in hope that tomorrow will be the day, or maybe even dieting. Let's bring in something we can all relate to. Even dieting, we say, oh, tomorrow will be fine, or, oh, it's going to get better, or it will work, or we can't change anything else apart from ourselves. We can't change our abuser. And we have to realize that we're actually addicted. Either we're stuck through financial reasons, or we're addicted to the person. And there's a thing in psychology and counseling and therapy called the cycle of change. It's a motivational change machine that we use with people fortunate enough to access our help. And I say fortunate enough because the lines are very, very long. It's a very expensive agency to access. But if you are thinking of leaving, the biggest key I can give you, if you're listening to this now, or you're an agency working with people, is that we have to find out what our true, honest an open motivation for leaving is. And that can be very difficult. Just for example, a world survey on why people diet, for example, number 2 on the list, would you believe, was because people wanted to order what they wanted to in a restaurant rather than what they felt other people wanted to see them order. And then that led to more secret and abusive eating, binge eating. You might be surprised at that, but you might also be surprised at the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 reasons for leaving an abuser. It's really difficult. If we love someone, or we're addicted to them, or we're obsessed by them, or we are terrified of leaving. And don't forget, an abuser, coercive, Judge Kelly, I would like to talk to you at length about that, because that's what I'm driving globally, is to make narcissistic and coercive abuse criminalized. And it's not at the moment, unfortunately. It's very difficult to pin down, but it needs to be. But what we need is, we need a way of us saying to ourselves, okay, so if we weren't with this person, what we're going to fill our lives with, because being addicted to an abuser takes up all of our life. It's consuming, and no one will believe us, mostly. No one will believe us. So my advice to you would be to find some person or agency that will listen to you and be trustworthy enough to hold what you're going to tell them without taking further action. And that's the most important thing to the agencies maybe listening to me. We are so disempowered being abused that when we do reach out, we want to stay in control of our abuser and our outing ourselves and what we do next, because it's the only way we can be safe. We are the only people that know the expertise on our personal lives and our children, if we have children, or our extended family. And a lot of the time we're not believed. We might have mentioned it to somebody, we're not believed. So it depends on our familial and friendship background as to what steps we take. So really being honest and open, explaining what our part and getting in touch with our partner is fine, but sometimes we really need to stay where we are until it's right time for us to make that move, unless, of course, there's imminent danger. Next slide, please. We can't change people, but we can change ourselves. And Alexis, I'd love to have an open forum with you about that, because it really isn't about changing our abuser. It really isn't about helping them to see the light, to see the difference. Because if we are in a continuous domestic abuse situation, we have been brainwashed, gaslighted by them. So we really don't know what's them and what's us. What we do have to start doing is unwrapping and unlayering our false education from our abusers. I like to say in interviews that if your partner drops a cup in the kitchen, you run to clear it up, and you're apologizing for them for dropping that cup, you are probably in a very serious domestic abuse situation. And whether it's coercive, battery, etc., emotional, financial, it's time to really consider, is this where I'm meant to be? Am I worth more? Can I get more? And is there such a thing as peace in life? Next slide. And my biggest voice is for children. It always has been, as a child that had a very difficult beginning myself. I wrote this book about how we're training our kids, and we don't actually know how we're training our kids because we forget how perceptive they are. And I sit at airports, I sit in bus stations, I sit on the beach, and I'm a big people watcher. And I see how we train our children sometimes. And I see arguments in families, and we're not really sure how we are impacting our children. And even if you're a same-sex couple without children or with children, a heterosexual couple with or without children, if you've got nieces, nephews, or friends' children's watching you, or you're a teacher, or you're a police officer or a judge or a corporate person and you're being abused, and yes, it knows no boundaries. Domestic violence is in all spheres of life, doesn't matter who you are. If you are in that situation and you are not being honest, you're not getting in touch with yourself, such as Alexis did, we are training our children that this is normal. We are teaching our children that there's no boundaries to be had and there's no safety to be had. And we're teaching our children to be in chaos, which is really, really bad for their development. So the final word from me today is it's about education. It's educating, it's educating services, it's educating people, it's educating friends and family of people, it's educating people that care about people, that battery is one tiny pinhead of our problem. Suicide is much, much bigger. Self-harm is much, much bigger. But the worst thing of all is in domestic violence, people live in death. And what I mean by that, they live not having a life, in actual fact, having an awful dark life in so many ways. So I'd like to end by saying, if any of you, even if you're in a service right now and you're keeping it quiet and you're secretly being abused, think about the safest and most effective step for you. And safe needs to be in the hands of someone that will listen to you. The first step is huge. It's scary. We feel guilty for talking about the perpetrator. The first step is huge, but it needs to be controlled. It needs to be sensitive. And the one thing is, if you are going to take those steps, be transparent and honest with your lawyer. Be transparent and honest with the agency. Be transparent and honest with your counselor. If you aren't, it doesn't work. And the amount of times I have been with lawyers and judges and services, and we've gone, oh, he or she went back to them. We didn't know that until the court date. Why didn't you tell us the truth? Because now you screwed it. They've got off. Or when's your time? When is your time? Because you can have 7 or 8 failed times, like dieting, or 25 times in my case. You can have all these failed attempts, but there's going to be the one attempt that works. And that's what our hope is. That one attempt will work for you. Thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. And I think that's a perfect toss over to you, Alexis. You know, time is flying. So give us what we need to know, and then we're going to ask Judge Kelly to give us tools. What can we do? And at the end, we'll ask Judge Kelly to join us. I know there are a lot of really great questions here. So Alexis, give us your call to action, and we'll go to take it away.
All right. Well, just like Michael said, awareness, I guess self-awareness is the number one thing that really is the first step in anything, when you're self-aware of what's going on in your own life. Because I know I was gaslit. I felt like I was the one going crazy. I was, losing control of my own life. So self-awareness would be like the first step, then awareness to the community. Because again, like was stated earlier, being believed, because I know I came forth to enforce police enforce like a law enforcement officer prior, and I wasn't believed, and then I just kept quiet because you never really know. Then support has been my saving grace. Honestly, I'm completely 1,000% thankful for my support system, for my family, my friends. And the CVAC. The CVAC has been an immense support system to help me through this. They have plenty of resources for the community, for others that are going through the same thing. And honestly, I was reluctant to go at first, and I'm forever thankful too, because it opened up so many doors for me to, have this platform here to tell my story that could potentially help other people. Because again, it was stated before, You can be in an abusive relationship. I know I was in an extremely abusive relationship, not only physically, but in all other aspects as well. But it wasn't the first time that was put hands on me. It wasn't the second, it wasn't the third, it wasn't even the fourth. And like I said, it takes up to sometimes like 8 to 10 times before the, I guess, victim in this aspect leaves. And the one that caused me to leave was one that almost caused me to die. And that's why I stated earlier that I almost became a statistic, because with my abuser, I ended up having a head injury that I was hospitalized, and I'm still recovering from little by little. And just empathy goes a long way. Listen to people, because someone might be saying something that you're not even aware, or click in your own head that it's a cry for help in a sense, because I know I was isolated. And if you start seeing someone slowly disappearing and it's not their character, if you know someone and love someone and they're not just acting the same, those are just little yellow flags, I would say. I want to say red, because they could be in a happy relationship and doing their thing, but just check in on your loved ones. You never really know what they're going through. I try to check in on all the people I love on a regular basis, not only with domestic violence, but just if they're doing all right. Anyone can be affected by this. You really don't know what's going on in everyone's personal life. So just embrace the empathy.
With your brilliant leadership, you have empowered us all, Alexis, and we all know. And Yvonne, you've got a solution for us. It worked for Alexis, helped Alexis. She helped herself by working with you all. Give us quick, what have you got? What can we do?
Well, I think that definitely listen to a victim without judgment, as I mentioned before. Give them the time to listen and educate yourself so that you could be a source of valuable information. I think that definitely if a victim finds herself or himself in a situation of immediate danger, they definitely need to call 911. But if they are already in a situation where their life is not presently in danger, then they need to call the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center, which, as I will explain, is a one-stop center with 39 on-site partners. And we're able to provide a variety of services. To be quite precise, we have 38 services that we provide to victims of domestic violence, sexual violence, and human trafficking. So I think it's about utilizing the resources. It's about educating. If you happen to be someone that a victim confides in, have that information available, be knowledgeable, make that referral, because what they need is help. They need support. They need to see that there are solutions out there. And, we, Miami-Dade County, has 4 domestic violence certified centers, which are shelters for battered women, 4 locations in Miami-Dade County, which is it enough? It's never going to be enough, because domestic violence is very, is a very prominent, it's very prevalent in our community. But we are lucky enough, as Judge Kelly mentioned before, that we have a lot of resources in Miami-Dade County. When we compare this county to other areas, we see that we are very fortunate. So I think it's a matter of taking action, Maria, pointing any victim, survivor in the right direction, calling 911, calling CVAC, and letting us help them with whatever it is that they need, including shelter.
We've given out about almost 30,000 of these physical cards, Yvonne, you and I, and many, many people with the Women's Fund and others. But we also have in the link a link to these cards. So have it in your car, have it in your phone. You can call the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center at any time. We know so many people have been helped. We include the 911 there because, as the deputy director will tell you, they're there to save lives. And we put 211 in there because sometimes you can't remember a number, and that's a much easier to remember. And 211 will direct you to the Coordinated Victims Assistance Center. So there is never, everyone you know at the dinner table, at your place of worship, in your family, they need to know that there is always something that they can do. And it will take you 1 minute talking about today to empower everybody in your network to do it. We encourage you all to do so. So Deputy Director, we ask you to quickly say what you think we should do, and then you as well, Michael, and then we're going to go to these questions because there's some burning here. Go ahead, Deputy Director.
Thank you. I just want to add to that regarding, when we talk to individuals who may be victims of domestic violence, one is not to judge them, make them feel as comfortable as possible. And a lot of times, when we start having these conversations with victims of domestic violence, we want to push them out of a situation. And I agree with the doctor. They have to go at their own time. They got to go at the right time. So sometimes we try to push them out of a situation. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be there. But we're not in that situation. We just need to be there to help, provide them the support that they need and show them where the resources that, that they can get to help them within that situation. And we talk about solutions, law enforcement on our side, we just need to be more out there, do a lot more education and be receptive or understand that a lot of times people don't trust law enforcement and they may not. They may think that we don't believe them. So we got to be very mindful and careful about how we're coming across and when we're interacting with our victims, that we're utilizing the empathy and just being very supportive of them and making sure that we provide them with the resources and also just checking up on them. A lot of times we go from call to call, and even with our detectives, we don't have that time to go back sometimes and making sure that they're okay. But one thing I can say that our department, we have some excellent victim advocates in-house, so that kind of helps us as well. So when we're not able to go back out and do those extra touch-ups, we do have our victim advocates that can help us with that. We just need to up our education and just make sure that we're giving that information out and being there and being receptive and supportive of our victims.
You inspired great trust, and your leadership within the force, I'm certain, will just make more and more people able to trust. So thank you so much. Michael, more wisdom for us, please.
Be safe. Whatever you do, however this impacts you, whatever first step you make, be safe. Never underestimate the human mind. And we are never free. Once we are in a domestic abusive relationship, we got there for a reason. We got there because of our codependency. We got there because of our kindness was in the wrong hands. But once we're there, and once we've had a really difficult time leaving, we are never free. It is a work in progress, and we have to always be aware that we can be hooked back in either by the previous abuser or by the next one sitting there waiting to feed off of you. It's so well documented that we go from one to another to another to another. So bear that in mind. That's my leaving note for you. I'm actually sending a bunch of books over. They're actually winging their way to you right now, Women's Fund, for you to use in your services, and maybe they'll be of help.
They most certainly will. Thank you so much. Don't go anywhere, please. We're going to ask Judge Carol Kelly to please join us now for this Q&A portion. There are so many leaders here in the audience, and we've got a few questions that come into me from many ways. So I'm going to start with the first one. And I think this could be taken from both a law enforcement and a legal side as well. So how can we, when survivors of domestic violence come in contact with law enforcement, how do we protect them from criminalization if and when they need to physically defend themselves? Who would like to take that first? Judge Kelly.
Well, I would love to hear from Director Daniels, but it is a problem. We every day have victims of domestic violence arrested for domestic violence when they're fighting back. We then, police are called to the scene. They have to make a determination who's a primary aggressor, what went on, often in very, very stressful circumstances. And many times victims don't want the respondent to get arrested, but the respondent or the defendant or the abuser, let me say, really doesn't care if the victim gets arrested, because it's just one more way to abuse a victim and show that you better not call police, you better not get help, because bad things are going to happen to you. So, you know, it's a difficult job for police when they go out. And I think it's just training police, letting them, you know, and I think the department, I really would love to hear from the director, because it's really her question.
Actually, Judge, you're absolutely right. It's very, very hard because remember, when law enforcement goes on the scene, they are making arrests based on the evidence that they see and what's presented to them. That includes if there's any witnesses on the scene, but it is hard to make the determination when you only have two individuals, no witnesses, and you got one person saying one thing and the other person saying something else, and they're looking at the evidence on scene. You're right. That's why it's important if in fact victims are victims of domestic violence, that they report it, so that we know that there's a history of the perpetrator doing these types of violence. But it's hard when you got law enforcement going on the scene and they only have these two individuals, and they have to identify the aggressor. And sometimes the victim at that time may have gotten the best of the perpetrator and they become the aggressor in that case. It's hard. We have to do a lot more work to ensure that we don't continue to criminalize our victims.
May I add something?
Please. Yes, please.
It's so important to have a safe bag. This is what I train people in. If you are in a situation where you are used to domestic violence, like we have a pregnancy bag for hospital, have a safe bag, have just a couple of dollars, a separate phone, another phone, have certain things in there you can grab and run. As soon as you, most people that have perpetrators in their life can see the turn, they can see the change. As soon as you see that, rather than defend or get hooked in or react, grab your bag that's secret in a place no one will find it and leave. Leave.
Can I add something to that? I actually attempted that at one point and I was followed and cornered. And yeah, that is a great, like, number one thing, which I tried, but again, it's not always foolproof to try and leave. And that was where I had a issue with at that point. So, I mean, you should always have multiple plans in place in case, you know, that one doesn't follow through.
That actually leads us to another question, and I'm sure, Michael, you all often have advice on this one as well. Yvonne, you often talk about having a plan, because as Judge Kelly indicated earlier, it's often when you called it the decedent. So when the victim or the survivor or the person who is being abused is ready to leave, that is when it's the most dangerous time. So what can you tell us about plans?
Okay, so yeah, basically I wanted to interject and talk about the safety plan. And that is one of the things that we do for every survivor that comes into the center. Every survivor has a different situation. So what may have worked for one may not work for another one. So that's why every survivor of domestic violence needs to have an advocate sit with them and elaborate a safety plan that works for that individual. When we do a safety plan, Maria, we take a few things into consideration. One of them is the level of danger. There is an instrument that we utilize, which is it's an evidence-based instrument authored by Dr. Jackie Campbell, which is the danger assessment. Every person that walked into our center receives that assessment. We complete it with the survivor, and that leads us to understand, at least to have an idea of all the elements that are involved in the case, and therefore a possible score of danger. That along with the needs of the victims, that we also do a need assessment, that allows us to, again, have a clear picture of what the situation is, and that allows us to work with the victim in putting together that safety plan. Again, sometimes it may be as simple as connecting her with some resources, having elaborate, like Dr. Michael said, definitely having her most important documents put aside, because in a moment,
It might be my internet, but I think Yvonne just froze. Yvonne's
No, I
right.
think froze, yeah.
Yeah.
That is part of the safety plan. The back is part of the safety plan. And again, working out we had a client, for example, that had to develop a situation with the.
And again, Yvonne, you're frozen. We do have that question on the side that maybe.
So on and so forth. So we go through a safety plan. It has 28 recommendations, and that is basically a fundamental element at the time that a survivor or victim is escaping the domestic violence.
Yvonne, is that list available to friends and family of people who are concerned? Because that is another question we have on the side. What do I do when the person that I love and I care for isn't ready, and I need to understand, I need to become literate and educated?
Absolutely, Maria. We can definitely provide a sample of a safety plan. But I also wanted to go back to some of the comments that were made with regard to that. I think it's very important for everyone to understand that even though we have the best intention, when we see a loved one, a friend that is in a situation, survivors and victims are uniquely qualified to make the determination as to when they're ready to walk away. Sometimes I have been involved in many cases that they're, by the way, very frustrating, because as an outsider and as an expert on the subject, I can see what's going to happen. We picked up this lady, Maria, 3 weeks ago. We picked her up in Opaloca, 11 o'clock at night, a baby, 3 months baby. We picked her up at that time. We took her to the shelter. Within 2 days, she had left the shelter, didn't tell anyone. Well, you know, a week and a half later, she calls back, now bitten severely by the same individual. Did we fail? Did we do something wrong? No, we did not. We provided her with everything. We placed her in a shelter. We did everything, injunction. But again, victims, they need to be ready. They need to be ready to become survivors. And sometimes that doesn't come at the time that we understand should be the time. So we need to respect a victim's autonomy to make some decisions and make those comments with responsibility. I hear very often people say, no, she should leave, she should leave. But are you gonna open the door of your homes when she's being hunted down by an aggressor with a gun? Are you gonna be the person doing that? If you're not, then let her make her decisions, because there is such a thing as a time that is adequate for that victim.
You all have empowered us so much here today, because you can see this Impact Collaborative. You can look at the Impact Collaborative that we had in October, which talks about trauma, why it's so difficult to leave, and what happens to the neurology of people to help us all understand. You can read Dr. Michael's books. Yvonne, people have asked here if they can get that sample plan. And I think we should talk about that on a separate, if there's some way that we could post that on our Women's Fund website as well, whether that's appropriate or not. This has been absolutely terrific. And it never ends here. You know, we have 4 pillars in the Women's Fund. We have economic mobility, we have leadership, we have health and well-being, and freedom from violence. And freedom from violence is going to come back, and we're going to talk about it again and again and again. And every time that we come here, there are new tools, there's new information, and there's so many new networks that we can plug into. The importance of this conversation cannot be underestimated, because it very well is likely that somehow you will be influencing somewhere to save somebody's life or their quality of life. So we thank you so much for being here. In the 1 minute we have left, we exclaim to you that this is your Women's Fund. Whether you're showing up to get information about what you need to know and what you can do, whether you're part of our volunteer corps, whether you're coming not even as part of our volunteer corps, but coming to the ballot training session, nonpartisan, on what you need to know about the ballot so you can make your own decisions and vote in these midterm elections coming up. That is empowering as well. Whether you're fueling us with the fuel and energy that we need, being a grand mission, grand supporter, or small donations, it does not matter. We do need to be able to come together. We do need fuel. So this is your Women's Fund, and we invite you to come together at least once a month for these Impact Collaboratives, to please put your voice and complete the exit survey. We are iterating every day. This team and board are working every day to shift and be better and better and more in conjunction with you all. Next time this month, we're going down to just 1 hour, and it will be fast but amazing, because you're going to listen to the grassroots wisdom of the community leaders who are looking at innovative ways to improve a system that doesn't work. Because you know what, women were just supposed to take care of the kids, so we weren't supposed to have a great early childhood education system. So we have to do something about that. Come back here, please, same time, but 9 to only 10 a.m. On Thursday, November 3rd, and you're going to meet some brilliant leaders. So again, thank you so much. This is your Women's Fund. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, because that's empowering too. Panelists, Judge Kelly, thank you so much. I don't know how my head isn't exploding. How much can one person learn from you each and all? Thank you so much. Want to unmute yourselves? Michael, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for putting this together.
Yes, thank
Always
you.
for having me.
Stronger together. And we, I know the mayor spoke in our town hall that we hosted with many other community partners. We're going to host an annual town hall with the mayor, and she spoke very specifically, Deputy Director, about police force was really iterating and learning and doing special tests, and officers were learning more and more on how to work. And I know, Judge Kelly, you work with many officers doing trainings. Yvonne, you do as well. So it's incredible to see this group, for us all to be able to see this group of incredible leaders who are all working together. Alexis,
Thank you, Maria.
you'll be
We really
back,
appreciate
right?
the opportunity.
I'm sorry?
You'll be back. This is your Women's Fund. We're at your service.
Yes, of course. I'm glad I've been given this opportunity to, shed some light and give my personal input to other people out there. And I just want to clarify, not all police officers or law enforcement have not been helpful. It just happened to be that one that it was my first one that I flagged down that happened to take the male side, but I've had many police officers that have helped me through this and have continuously been there for me. So again, it just stems back from education and awareness.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to clarify that because of
No,
my
you was good. Let me tell you, it takes courage to do what you're doing. And I'm just so proud of you that you're able to come out there and talk about your experience and give people an insight into things that you went through and how, they can change. So kudos to you, definitely.
And Alexis, you have a gift. A lot of people don't have the strength or ability to get their message across as you have. So I wish there were more of you.
Well, thank you. Hopefully my message will have other people come up in the masses and create that strength. Again, it all boiled down to my support system, because I was fearful of coming forward and being believed. And I was also embarrassed that how could I let this happen to me? How could I, succumb to being controlled over another human being? And I lost control of myself. So little by little, I've been gaining my voice, and this platform has given me an opportunity to shed my voice to other people, and hopefully I can continue helping others. And that's basically where I stand. My voice is here. Of course I was a little fearful to come and nervous, but it's to help others, and that's what I strive for.
And you
You're
did
amazing.
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 You did a great job.
You're all amazing, and so many amazing people in the audience in our Central Plaza here today. We had, I don't know, there were like 81 of us at different points, leaders, lay people from the spiritual community. This conversation is important, and we're not going to stop until the violence stops. Right, team?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye. See you all.